Welcome to tonight's event. The topic being the Greek community of Sydney, challenges and opportunities by Sydney-based activist, I can't call you an activist, George Mpliokas. We have a lot to cover tonight, so we'll just quickly rush through some housekeeping items. There's the 100 years tribute concert to Mpliokas by the Mpliokas on the 31st of May, the Recital Centre. I believe there's still a handful of tickets left, so reach out quickly if you want to attend that event. And there are also two theatre productions in the works, The Life of Byron, not this one in the audience, and Lysistrata. And just go to our website homepage. You'll find all the details there and how to make reservations as well. And just a reminder that next week's seminar, the Pontian Genocide Memorial Seminar by Dinka Limnio, has been shifted from the standard Thursday till Tuesday. So that's on the anniversary date, on Tuesday the 19th of May. That's next week. So there'll be no seminar on the Thursday because we're bringing it forward to the Thursday. Now, the following week, where Thursday falls on the 28th of May, that seminar by Professor Raul Sanchez Uribarri won't take place. It's been cancelled due to some sort of personal issues. And then we'll be returning back to the mezzanine on Thursday, the 4th of June, with a really fascinating seminar on antiquity. Let's move to tonight's seminar. The Sydney or New South Wales Greek landscape has always been different to Melbourne. After all, it can't be the same as the world's most livable city. It's different. It could partly be due to geography, partly due to different rural-urban mix, partly due to the trajectory of different organisations that arose and evolved over time, partly due to prominent influential individuals and their impact. There are all sorts of factors. Today's speaker will attempt to describe this landscape, but also try to expand about the future opportunities and possibilities. It's not all doom and gloom. There's plenty of opportunities, plenty of hope that things will evolve in a very positive way as well. And who is this speaker? It's George Mpliokas, who is a man for all seasons, jack of all trades and master of none. Kaposetsi Yorgo? No? George, a lot of you would know him. He's a Greek Australian leader, a volunteer, an advocate with more than 15 years' experience, leading various community organisations. Most of you would know him through GAS, the Greek Australian Society. He was one of the original founders, or the founder, correct, you? And at the moment is the co-president. A very important organisation when it comes to the networking of young Greek Australian professionals. He's also the president of the Hellenic Village, the chair of the New South Wales branch of the Pharos Alliance, the Vice President of the World Confederation of Thessalians, and the Trustee for the Foundation of Hellenic Studies at University of New South Wales. Anything I left out as well? He's also in a very committed relationship as well, amongst all. He works as a programming and engagement advisor to the New South Wales Melbourne Parliament. George, it's good to have you back in Melbourne. And I'm sure you've got a lot of interesting things to present. A big round of applause for our speaker tonight, George Mpliokas.
Thank you, Nick, for the very kind introduction. Master of None is probably a fair assessment. So thank you very much. It is a real pleasure to be here. I'll get this presenting, I think that should work, okay. And it's lovely to be back in Melbourne. It's great to be here amongst friends and to connect with, again, a very historic, dynamic Greek Australian community. So thank you very much to the Greek community for the invitation, Nick for your partnership, and hopefully I'll do that justice tonight as well. Guys, again, I think I've spoken to some of you already. If I do waffle and if the lights turn off, I'm sorry, but happy to continue the conversation. I think part of my MO has been to to have these conversations at the end of nights when the lights turn off, in the car parks, under shady bridges, signing deals or signing contracts. And it's in part about what we're talking about tonight as well. That I myself personally, have a story or an experience that's been shaped by my upbringing and my engagement in particular community organisations. Nick's mentioned a number of them, most of them currently as well, a few that predate the last couple of years as well. I'll share on that in a few minutes. And what I'd like to do is really outline, I think, my personal context in engaging into community, because I think everybody's story is unique and defined to each person. And I think that relationship between the individual experience and the organised or the institutional relationships that we have, I think, is really pivotal. We talk about community decline, we talk about community renewal, we talk about connectivity between generations, looking to steward and uphold these institutions and our identity, our culture, from one generation to another. I've committed more than a decade so far towards that objective, specifically in Sydney, but elsewhere as well. And it's not been without the support of friends and family and, of course, my wife. So thank you, Gabriella. Another shout out to you as well. Now, I'll bring this here again, just the acknowledgement of country. Nick's done so earlier tonight as well, but from our Young Leaders program, our briefing document, we did include it. We included it in the 2 languages, and specifically for the Greek Australian Society, we mentioned and noted different Greek spellings or descriptions of places across the country, and that is a lot thanks to SPS Greek as well for the translations of the welcome to country as well. I think very, 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 very telling. Talking about the Torres Strait Islander peoples as well. There's always a tongue twister there as well. But I won't go through it again. But I will acknowledge elders past and present in the same way that Nick has tonight as well. Now, I wanted to start again with this. This is a slightly different photograph of the one that I had on the title and pushed onto social media a few days ago. But it's incredibly cliched, but it is part of this story as well. It's this photo, or the original, is from 2020, prior to forming the Greek Australian Society. It was after the Lysicrides presentation, the Lysicrides Awards in the music conservatorium in Sydney's Botanic Gardens, a beautiful space, and organised by a gentleman called John Azarias. John Azarias was a managing partner at Deloitte, retired, an elder statesman, and support for me personally. And in that space, he's created something very impressive, and something that's maybe stands out, unique or different to many of the other Greek community organisations or institutions. And part of that was sharing to have Greek culture within arm's reach of power and influence, particularly in New South Wales, having federal ministers, premiers, and governors general supporting initiatives, funding these initiatives. The Lysicrides, an ancient Athenian tradition, and something that, again, is really not maybe so common into the Greek-Australian experience that we dove into. Following that's Krevgas. Krevgas is a northern Epirot who died in the ancient Olympic Games. I think, if I'm correct, was the first Olympian to receive a medal after dying because his opponent was disqualified. Thank you, Dean Kalimniu, for the explanation as well. So a bit about myself, and I'll share a few key elements or associations about me that helped my trajectory into the community, and then I'll make some observations about the past, about today, about where we're going. A few photos. Firstly, the far left, now with now His All Holiness the Patriarch Bartholomew in Constantinople. Back, if I'm correct, from 2019, I was sent there on assignment from the now closed Cosmos newspaper based in Sydney. So I was very lucky to have been sent there. I was on a work trip in Europe and took a detour to Constantinople. Very interesting and defining experience that I had there. But that's me with the Patriarchy and a little toy kangaroo, which he appreciated. He doesn't smile in many photos, maybe less so now than before. I got him to smile for that one, so I'm pretty happy with that. The centre one, again, the Greek Festival of Sydney. Themi, it's good to see you here tonight. Themi, you're in a photo, so that's at least one. Yeah, it's, again, the Greek festival, I don't mention a lot of specifically tonight, but I do refer to the community a lot. The festival is run now for about 40 years. It is a very historic cultural festival of the Greek community of Sydney, and that is from one period where I was on that festival committee. I spent, if I'm correct, between 4 and 5 years on that committee, and I'm not any longer. But from happier times, if we say from the Greek community and the time of the Greek festival. Next, again, the last couple of years I've dressed up as Santa Claus for good old Prom Thai restaurant. Those that you don't know, Michael Baro, Derek Thamrags, my best friend from high school. He's from Thailand, his background. His parents, his late mother, his father from Thailand. He moved when he was very young into Sydney, nearby suburb. We're the best of friends. And he was Michael Baro. At our wedding, I mentioned that of all the Greeks in the room, he was the one with the most philotimo. And that's a trait that we're very precious of and very proud of as Greek Australians. And I'm very blessed to have found somebody from another culture background to have expressed this quality, this trait. So, and also they need Santa photos. I'm bigger than anyone else on his staff, so he asked me to dress as Santa Claus. So that's me. I think this is, in essence, part of the theme for tonight, in that we live in the shadow of our ancestors, whether we know it or not. And I'll start from this, a few foundational organizations or groupings. I've shared this on social media before, but that's a photo when I was, again, a few kilos lighter, with Dad, my late father, Dimitris, Jim. Jim was a chef, he was a cook. Prior to that, he was Merchant Navy, Magida Vestakaravia. He met my mother in South America. My mum's from Chile. They married in Chile. They married with a civil wedding in Chile in the 1970s. They moved to Greece. His father was an old calendar priest. They had a religious old calendar wedding in Greece in 73. Mum had to learn to pistevo sta Hellenika before Papu would marry them both. And when he went back to Larissa, we're from Thessalia, he went and saw his father, and his father sent him back and forth 7 times to cut his hair. Dad had the cabanas, he had the long hair, he was in his rebellious state, the son of an old calendar priest. He was living his life overseas. But again, his upbringing was very challenging as well. And I think after his passing, again, going through Dad's things, one of the things that we found was this document on the right-hand side. And I think it's very touching that my father, specific to me, continues to teach me lessons even after his passing. And that I think this is somewhat different to people, Greek Australians my age or similar ages, in that the child of migrants specifically from an era of great difficulty and challenge in modern Greece. My father grew up hungry. It impacted him deeply. He did his best to raise a family so that we would never have to have that kind of experience as well. And it was in the 1990s, if you see, I think 92, that's right, where he'd been in Australia for about 15 years or so, but he hadn't really grasped the language, had basic English, and there was a government program at the time to improve the English of migrants. And this is part of his journal for his studies. The writing, I used to, when I was younger, make fun of my dad because of the way he would write both in Greek and in English. Τελικά, Dad had a Year 3 education in Greece, and he spent his time after that Year 3 education, emptying and changing the oils of tanks, going hungry during the day. The story was that Yaya, Sikorimeni, would put salt into the pot of boiling water, wait for sunset, and then say "Ita na martia na trome meta to vradi" as well, or as a way to help justify the ongoing hunger. So that is something that he spoke of very rarely, but I knew growing up that when he did decide to share these experiences, that they had meaning and had purpose, and that would be something to shape. So that's mum and dad and home. I'm the youngest of 3 siblings. My sister and my brother both went to Greek school. I didn't. They grew up in a much more typical migrant experience in the 1980s. Mine somewhat different in the northwestern suburbs of Sydney. Greeks around, but less so than the Marrickvilles and Mascots and Brightons of southeastern Sydney in particular. But again, opotitan Hellenes as well. It was still very much Greco-centric. And then we come to Sydney Olympic. I've got the scarf. No, it's not Themi's, but I'm sure Themi's has packed his. It's somewhere on his travels as well. But yeah, so I put this here because I think this is one institution in particular that intersects our community throughout much of its history. And particular photos here that help paint a picture of the intersection of our family story and that of the organisation and its connection with community. On the far left, it's not me, but it's my father with my older brother and with some of my sister's friends as well that I could recognise in the photo there from the early 80s. Probably Pradden Park in the inner west of Sydney. Dad's holding the Greek flag, and that was his nickname, or Pharos. So when I talk to the elderly members of the club, fans and supporters, "Ποιονού είσαι?" to Pharos. They remember straight away, even though they may not have seen him for years since his passing, and then many years before that as well. When Dad was unwell, again, we arranged for a photo with Alex Sanchez, top scorer. We won the league that year, really great season. The last game that Dad saw was with the grand final in 2018. That was, again, a very good day there as well. My wedding day, 2021, that's my brother's son, Dimitri, carries my father's name, with a little photo of my father with me. I didn't have many photographs myself with Dad at the football, and that's for me a regret personally. And I wanted to make peace with that in a way on my wedding day specifically, with the blessings again of Gabriella. Thank you very much, Gabriella. Bravo, yep. But I think again, for me, very meaningful to be at the place that I cherished very deeply. That's a big part of my personal community identity, and to have that shared between generations, I think is very telling. Down the bottom, again, Stinakropoli, Sydney Olympic. In Sydney, Sydney Olympic. I mentioned Michael Kontos earlier tonight as well before we started. He was the first president of Sydney Olympic after the transition from Pan-Hellenic Football Club. Again, elderly gentleman with the scarf in the centre. This is more or less the kind of community we see at Sydney Olympic. There are younger generations of supporters that care about the club, but they're not at the games necessarily every week, and we can talk about that as well, right? It is a talk about the community of Sydney. And then, again, from the other week, Peter Katholos, you'll see in the centre. It's me in the background, out of focus, and Peter Raskopoulos, another Socceroo and famous player of the club, behind that as well. This was an annual general meeting that was very acrimonious only a few weeks ago, reported in the Sydney Morning Herald. Essentially, more than 200 members have renewed their membership recently, dissatisfied with the state of the club, a number of issues there, voted in favour of removing the entire board and what's called a benefactor member, for that benefactor member to veto that decision. Not impressed, the majority of those members. So this is, again, a foreboding into tonight's conversation. Nick said it's not going to be all doom and gloom. I'll try my best. But very sensitive topic, specifically to the trajectory of Sydney Olympic, but I think a reflection in some ways of where our institutions are and what might happen if we're not careful as well. Now, Mugger. Sydney Olympic first because I was a mature age student myself at university. I dropped out of uni. I went back in my mid-20s. I joined the Macquarie University Greek Association because I just wanted to find 5 friends to go with me to Belmore and watch the soccer at Sydney Olympic. Right? My main objective in life wasn't to find a girlfriend, wasn't to save the Greek community, wasn't to cause more problems for the Greek community. It was just find a few friends and let's go watch the soccer together. Thankfully, I found plenty of friends, my good buddy, my wife, best friends as well that I've come to know and love because of this relationship and this engagement. I was on the committee for my entire time when I was back at university, treasurer 1 year, secretary another, president in one time as well. I was granted life membership in 2020. I was a board member or a committee member of the Greek Studies Foundation at Macquarie University subsequently as well. And then I was thrown off that committee and now it's closed as well. And as of last semester, Greek is no longer taught after 30 years at Macquarie University. Again, very acrimonious, very, very, very challenging. But here, again, that's our 35th anniversary in 2020. Again, late nights, that was my brother's office at the time with the current leadership then to put together the booklet the night before, I think 3 or 4 in the morning before I had to go to the printer. Another example of a late night there. Aya Sofia wearing a Mugger shirt. My graduation day, that's my graduation day, right? Wearing a Mugger shirt under my college shirt. And Stenakropoli, of course, Stenakropoli will get it as well. But up here, also, myself, George Psycholios, Anastasia Papagiogiou, and John Georgiaklis. John, George, and I took this engagement at university specifically and became co-founders of the Greek Australian Society. And that was how we were able to continue our community engagement. George Psycholios is from Monavasia, it's part of the Laconian associations in Sydney. Myself from Thessalia, Dad was the president of the Matilda Association for a time. The expectation, if any, was that young Greek Australians would enter the student youth organisations, the uni scene, and then they would fall off the face of the earth after that as well. Or in the alternative, that join the Greek community of Sydney, or they join particular community brotherhoods and associations. And really, without a clear and defined pathway to do so, there's a very low uptake of that transition from the universities into broader community life. And what we found in our experience in the mid-2010s especially, but beforehand as well, that there's a chasm. There was a chasm not in the expectations or the objectives of those organisations, but in how one treated the other. And I think part of our mission at the Greek Australian Society was to help bring the different generations together and to help really establish a more fluid transition between generations. And in a more fluid transition that would help maintain and steward community objectives and uphold our values in the longer term. So we formed GAS in 2021. I'm still involved on the committee of Matilda. I've been the president there for a period, but really the role is quite minimal, and we'll talk about that. Similar experiences for the other board members and other those of us as well. But this is essentially our 5 years of contribution towards the community. One important factor was that we made a point of not calling ourselves a youth organisation. We were focused on young Greek Australians, and we still are. And there's a distinction there to be made. We can talk about that. But also that we have a national focus. I think, looking at my research recently for this and my experience in community, we're very parochial on the one hand, but we're also very much focused in the cities or locations, the geography that we have here in Australia as well. And that has its own set of challenges that limit or restrict our ability to collaborate and to really prosper. So the Greek Australian Society, I am one of the co-founders. There are several. I am currently the president. I'm very proud of that relationship. Again, Nick asked me, don't make it a puff piece about gas. I promise it's not. But I do encourage you to learn more, ask questions about what we have specifically in mind for the future of our organisation as well. Matilda, I mentioned, again, because again, Matilda in New South Wales was formed in 1962. It is an example of one of many organisations in Sydney today, in that it was established to provide key services to migrants from these towns and villages, helping young migrants, mostly men from the 60s, find work, establish themselves, find somewhere to be sheltered, and to start their new lives and careers in Australia. One gentleman is now on my board at Hellenic Village, but is from the Hasiotes Association, another organisation that's since offshoot from our organisation, Matilda. But he was off the boat on, I think, on the Friday, and by Sunday he was secretary of Matilda Thessalians Benevolent Society, and that began his 60-year contribution to community life, and he's still going. He's not of the best of health. He is in his 80s. He's slowing down, but it started 6 decades ago, and that's commendable. It's worth noting, and it's important to objectively understand what that experience has looked like over the years. But for Matilda specifically, our organisation, or Silogosmas, today we're 100 members. We're 100 members because we had a special general meeting about Hellenic Village, because we're a shareholder and unit holder in Hellenic Village. We needed 50 members to be quorate. We reached 51 to be quorate to that meeting and make a decision regarding proceeds of sale for that site, which we'll talk about as well. So it's been a while since we've really looked into our own constitution and taken a deep dive into what's actually required. With greatest respect to my colleagues, my brother is now the president for the first time this year, but we have a mandated constitutional board structure or committee structure of 11, and we've been operating with 13 and 14 because Apokalusini, hey, let's give everyone a go. We're all collegiate. However, that we need to make sure that we're following the rules as well. And if we need to make changes for them, then there's a process to make those changes as well. Right now, we're in a sensitive situation where we're inheriting many millions of dollars, and we realise that we've got more people on our committee than should be voting on these decisions as well, or should be elected. So we don't want to rock the boat. But that's, I think, reflective of other community organisations where these institutions have just simply not conducted meetings, not kept registers of membership, and that's where there's a breakdown between the generations and in the value propositions of those organisations as well. But Matilda has changed over time. Right now, 3 events: picnics, a meeting and a lunch, and we continue. So Hellenic Village now is, again, I've been the chair for the last 6 years, and I've been on the board now for 8 years as well. So it is, again, it's been a big part of my life specifically. It's very contentious. It is very much in discussions and has been, if you're following either the Greek Herald or SBS or Greek City Times or the occasional release as well, is a very significant parcel of land that was purchased. Don't believe the hype, wasn't gifted, but it was purchased. It was originally leased in the early 1980s. The purchase into now a transfer of that lease into a purchase in 96, 97. The purchase price was $510,000, of which $491,000 was the purchase, and the remainder was a balance for operating costs and expenses. It's sold, and it is selling for $119.5 million. And that is a federation, in essence. It's a bare trust federation, 21 organisations, mostly brotherhoods, not exclusively, but neither the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese or the Greek community of Sydney were party to that. And I think there's something telling in that as part of the community history as well that needs to be explored, because Kimisidi aren't the 21 associations, because the knowledge hasn't transferred evenly across all those organisations with their own respects, but specifically on Hellenic Village. It leads to a lot of ambiguity or a lot of uncertainty about the objectives and the purpose and the vision for this project as well. It's been a difficult process. I lead a board of 11 board members. We represent 10 organisations. One of my vice presidents passed away 2 months ago. John, bless him, as well, had young family in his early 60s, had contributed for more than 30 years on this project as well. We all have our ups and downs in terms of our community life and the decisions that we make, but I respected John very much for his support. That's now we're currently, with his loss, operating on a board of 10. But that's Hellenic Village. Now, I wanted to make this point: community, and communities. I think that it's important because Greek Australians in Sydney make distinctions, or they don't make distinctions, and then we're not sure exactly what we're talking about, and that leads to some challenges as well. So I think it's important to outline what we're talking about when we're referring to each. I've politely added State Minister for Multiculturalism, Steve Camper, Greek Australian, into each of these as well to make it nice and confusing for you all as well. But on the left, small c community, and I've said it as, broadly speaking, the Greeks of Sydney as a whole, not specific to one jurisdiction or organisation. So we're talking about people that self-identify as Greek Australians, people that are identified as Greek Australians or Greeks, and again, sometimes you might hear that there's 1 million Greeks in Sydney, or that there's 500,000 Greeks, or whatever it might be. But really, in today's numbers, combined census estimates, we're talking about 100,000 people in Sydney's Greek community today, and that is a decreasing number, obviously, of Greeks that are born in Greece. Elderly Greeks and Cypriots to an extent as well, that again, that generation is passing on. But again, speaking earlier, some of us are the children of migrants, first generation Greek Australians, others that are third and fourth and fifth generation Greek Australians as well. I had this conversation with my pethera regarding the census. My wife's family is from Cyprus. They're multi-generational. The Yadas and Papoudis came in the 1940s and 50s. And I asked them, I stated first, I said, when I fill out the census, I put that I speak Greek at home. And I asked my pethera, do you do the same? She says, no, I don't. I said, but don't you? She said, yes, I do. I'm like, okay, so you speak Greek at home, but you didn't list it on the census that you speak Greek at home. What's that about? And that was, again, the start of a lengthy conversation. And again, without being able to go through all of the local residents of Elwood or Canterbury and ask them why they haven't put Greek in that census answer, I think there's an element of underrepresentation, but also, again, the understanding of different generations or different yenyes. So I think there's a value and a power in advocating specifically on important markers like this. I think, again, having a conversation with regards to SBS and the airtime and the time slots for its important bulletins and resourcing. I think this is a very tangible example of where this can make a difference, and it's incumbent on community organisations to advocate for it. But yeah, so that's the small c. The big C, again, we're talking about the Greek Orthodox community of New South Wales. I've been basing some of my research for tonight's topic on a PhD thesis at the Sydney University from Tigris in the 1980s. And again, it spends a big chunk of the opening of its thesis talking about the different communities, and that there was one community, and then there was a community that became the community in the 1940s. So it is hard to track sometimes, maybe too hard for people to bother, and they ask for the too long didn't read version as well, and that's maybe an inhibitor or a barrier to really understanding more about exactly who and what we're talking about. But the Greek Orthodox community of New South Wales, its real origins are from the community of Ayatriada, 1898, one of the first churches in Australia. I think Evangelismos might be a little bit older, but Surrey Hills, Burke Street, and then St Sophia again afterwards as well. So there's an important discussion regarding the relationship between the churches, and then how the community continued to evolve over time. And then communities, big C, right? So either talking about a particular brotherhood, a particular association, a particular Orthodox parish and community. So, and this is an evolution, I think, is, if I understand correctly, similar in Melbourne as well. But I've had conversations with young Greek Australians that are been very opposed to the concept of a parish community. And it's interesting to find out their motivations or understandings and what that's about as well. But I suppose we'll get to that also. Thank you very much to Minister Steve Camper for the appearance. But challenges and opportunities. This presentation may end up being a little bit lopsided with the slides specifically, but I think, in my humble opinion, the emphasis is, or the need is to look back, to look at now, to look forward, and to look deeper. And what I mean by that is that there's, again, having conversations with community leaders in Sydney, in Melbourne, and other parts of the country, is that we don't have a good enough understanding of our own history. We don't know our own history as Greek Australians. And I think that it's important to consider how the histories are being written, how they're being maintained, and how they might be interpreted differently over time as well. It's challenging, but I think is something that we need to do. Looking at now is, again, looking at the particular compositions of community associations. If we look at them on a map and how that compares with the metrics on the ground, I think, again, what will be evident is that measuring success very quickly becomes very complicated, and that we need to needle the thread through understanding where we can extract value, where we can collaborate to increase our prospects, and where we can really charter that future trajectory as well. Looking forward, again, who will be leaders of our community institutions? Who will be responsible for the legacy of our forebearers? Who will be now there to help and uphold the values and the mission of our organisations, and appropriately transition them from one trajectory to another where appropriate? I think, again, a lot of the conversation is simply about upholding our identity, upholding our culture, guarding our religion, and they're all very important and relevant topics and points of discussion. But it's important to note that it may be appropriate to change course, or to detour, or to navigate in different ways towards either a common goal or a new one as well. And then looking deeper, that's really, again, getting into the nitty-gritty. I think the issues that we have in Sydney's community today is that we'll map out dozens and dozens of community organisations that exist on paper but not in real life, or they exist and have memberships, but their memberships are doubled up with the synagogue next door to them, or that there's, again, leadership of one organisation that's superseded by the same individuals leading others as well. So how do we identify conflicts? How do we work in alignment? How do we navigate that chart in context as well? I think is probably going to take more than the allocated time. So yeah, looking back, the power struggle between the Greek Church and the established Greek community organisations in Australia, Dimitris Tsingris. So again, for the recording's sake and from the earlier conversations, we're talking about potentially redacting certain sections of tonight's topic. Again, I think it may be more controversial for the Greeks of Sydney to talk about its contents in this thesis. It's 40 years old, but it's provocative maybe in some regards, or maybe would be to Greek Australians today. I think they may be shocked to learn, probably for the first time, about the community dynamics historically and what it's meant for historic institutions as well. A little bit less so from Professor Steve Georgiakis as well, but again, I'm a Sydney Olympic fan, so we're going to talk about these sports clubs and associations, but only in certain detail. So again, this is an early example of church services. If I'm correct, that's Ayatriada, and then the Miss Pan-Hellenic Ball. I'm proud to say that my big sister was first runner-up of Miss Pan-Hellenic 1992, a point that I bring up to her very regularly. Congratulations on first runner-up. But it's in reading and researching on this, fast-forwarding a bit, but specific for Pan-Hellenic, the precursor to Sydney Olympic, the one club, if you will, but it's noted in Tigris that the event that they held in the early 60s was the first instance where warring factions in Sydney's community and archdiocese actually were in the same room, where they had close to 800 guests attend the function, raising funds for the club and for a broader community, small c. It was the first time since their more recent warring faction or warring parties that they were in the same room together. And that was multiple church hierarchs, separate church hierarchs. That was community presidents. It was other leaders of brotherhoods and associations. And they all supposedly voted on Miss Pan Hellenic. So now, again, I will fast forward through this as well, but again, we'll start very quickly. 1898, the Greeks in Sydney, numbering 147, decided to build a Greek Orthodox church, the Holy Trinity. 147 at the time made a decision, they built a church. I think that, again, sometimes the more of us are in the room, the less we get done, is maybe the issue sometimes. I think that's not necessarily a Greek problem, or we can't blame our community leaders for it. I think whenever I send an email and put 1,000 people on it, less people are likely to respond. Sometimes you just need to have a direct relationship and get things done. And these first 147 Greeks in Sydney built a church. It's again, a very historic church on Bourke Street, very lovely part of Surrey Hills nowadays as well, but still haven't had the pleasure of actually being inside and seeing the church for myself. The Greek community is recorded as being placed officially under the jurisdiction of the Church of Greece by the 1914 Constitution of the community. Is that important? If I were to ask somebody in Sydney on the street today, they'd say, of course it's not important, it's 100 years ago, who cares? But I think that this is about a broader conversation about civics, about the relationships between the individuals and the institutions that form our community space. And I think this is an early example of a constitution noting jurisdiction and authority and shared responsibility. I know that Matera, New South Wales, as a former president, as a committee member, has it noted in our constitution from 1962 that the association acknowledges the Greek community of Sydney. Doesn't acknowledge it for being the preeminent organisation in the city, doesn't say it's better or more important than the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese. It simply states it in its constitution that it recognises the Greek community of Sydney. And then we start with talking about fighting. Papades, fascinating that there was, again, priests from the Church of Greece, priests from the Ecumenical Patriarchate, walking through the door uninvited, tried to take off his cap. I'm not sure if it was a mitre or if it was the other, but then one priest got kicked out of the church, right? And that's a sign of early internal conflicts. Whether or not it's internal necessarily, it maybe talks about the dynamics at the time, Ecumenical Patriarchate, Church of Greece, etc. But then priests get removed, others end up in different spaces, the Holy Trinity, and then the community says we may need to fight and create different spaces. And it was the first instance that Tigris mentions of having those that are followers of the Holy Trinity Church and those that are in favour of either challenging them through the courts or alternatively deciding to establish a new church, St. Sophia Cathedral. This one here, the telegram from the Ecumenical Patriarchate advising of the establishment of the metropolis, and that the first metropolitan being listed and being sent as the Metropolitan of Australia. The community just said no. They replied on Telegram saying that we don't accept this and we're concerned about what it means, and hence began, I think, a long-winded and multifaceted conflict between the organised community in Sydney and the Archdiocese and the Patriarchate at the time. So, again, the Trial of the Four, maybe we'll talk about that a little bit later, but again, Holy Trinity in 1926, the Metropolitans escorted home, massive crowd come and basically stop the service. The Greek community, after serious consideration, has decided to break its links with the Patriarchate once and for all. The arrows of hatred, lies and fraud will not be permitted to penetrate our steely chest. again, the community applies to the autocephalic Greek Orthodox Church of America and Canada for ecclesiastical dependence. The reason I note some of this, and I don't go the entire way through the history of the Greek community specifically, but I think the reason I made a point of listing this particular timeline is that the common conception of the rift between the community in Sydney, the Big C community in Sydney, and the Archdiocese today was about the threat of communism in the 1940s and 50s and 60s and beyond, where in fact the divisions and the animosity clearly seems to have predated that phenomenon, and that there's multiple church hierarchs from multiple jurisdictions involved, right, compounding with multiple community leaders, Big C, in Sydney specifically, and then eventually with the Federation as well, which is established over time also. And if, again, we were to talk to anyone on the street about this, if they were to have an idea, that it really would be, it's just about communism. And I would fundamentally reject that assertion. It is much more multifaceted and detailed and worth exploring. So then, Metropolitan Christophoros is recalled. We have Timotheos. There's a period where, again, both Greek church congregations agreed in. So there's attempts at unity, trying to bring it back. We've got two churches now, but we want to unite and support one another and just build the community back again. There's again, simultaneous AGMs, Holy Trinity Saints. Again, I live for this stuff as well. This is what a time to be alive, right? So there's the simultaneous AGMs. If I remember, I might have it on the map. The churches, I think, are 300 or 400 meters away from each other. They are literally, within a stone's throw of one another in the old part of Sydney. They ran consecutive or simultaneous meetings to unify, and it did in some regards. And then there were some other issues as well regarding or how that trajectory continued as well. But Metropolitan Timotheos was appointed to Rhodes and left Australia, and then we had Theophylaktos, who was brought in as well as a new metropolitan. The first pan-community conference held in Sydney, 19 Greek communities participate. Greek ambassador attends. The metropolitan declines and does not send priests. Right. So now into the 40s and 50s, we have the tussle now of the secular community, Big C, the organised community of Sydney, and its counterparts across the different cities, are really vying for supremacy in this space. Theophylaktos, responds by organising the clergy laity conference, and then dies after a car accident. All right. So again, a tumultuous end to that metropolitan, and then we have again Ezekiel, who's elected metropolitan, becomes archbishop after the metropolis is elevated to an archdiocese in 1959. And again, more discussions, more further detail about Ezekiel and his relationship with the Greek government, and further details there as well. But people start getting excommunicated. If I've read this correctly from Tigris, it's firstly in Adelaide. Right? He excommunicates the committee, the council of the Greek community of Adelaide. And in doing so, it pushes these Greek community leaders into solidifying their position with the autocephalic archdiocese, and an ecclesiastical rift really takes shape. Now that's resolved in 2011, based on what I have here, and again, it's even for me a bit time immemorial because it predates my time engaging back into the community, right? And for people that I engage with, my colleagues at GAS, again, it's not part of common or it's not part of common memory, right? So if we were to piece this together, which we don't, which maybe we should, then there's the question about, again, better understanding the length, the detail of that ecclesiastical rift, the circumstances in which the agreement was made, and how we've been able to engage since. But I wanted to see this. This is, again, Abercrombie Street. So one of the Greek community of Sydney's churches, they have 3 churches, and they attempted to establish others as well. It looks like in Leichhardt and in Chatswood, but they were challenged by the archdiocese. One of the things that Ezekiel managed to do was create a relationship with the broader community, small c, of establishing parish communities in the suburbs. Right, so where the Greek community of Sydney was retained to 3 parishes in the inner city of Sydney, the other now parish communities now directly under organised by the Archdiocese continued to sprawl out into the suburbs, and we see that Liverpool, Parramatta, Blacktown, but in various suburbs, of which there's now 30 churches, if not more, across the Sydney area. So again, this now is. Again, the Articles of Association. This is the front page of the Constitution of Hellenic Village, right? By OFSE, right? The Federation of Hellenic Associations, which is our former title. Again, this is October 1987. So we fast forwarded a bit. Haven't brought up the time of Stylianos. Again, can deep dive into that as well. But here, I think this is a reflection of the ongoing conflict between the organisations, the community, and the Archdiocese, which is its seat is in Sydney, and Hellenic Village, originally OFSE, was really in part, if not entirely, but in part established to be an alternative to both sources of authority and power amongst the organisations, right? So that, again, the organisations that contributed to this space, right, which was from the Pan-Arcadian Association from the 1970s into the 80s, engaging with the state government of New South Wales to find a parcel of land for its community space, received a response in essence from the state government of the time that we won't do it for one Greek community organisation because we gave you a parcel, we'd be giving the rest of New South Wales to just the Greeks. So please form a centralised committee, an organisation to unify those efforts and create that initiative. All right. In the end, there were 30 or so organisations, brotherhoods mostly, but not exclusively, that engage in this process. And when it came from being a long-term lease into a sale in the mid-1990s, 21 organisations, brotherhoods, associations decided to make an investment, $10,000 a share, up to 3 shares per organisation.
Can you just clarify that? Did you say it was a piece of land that was given by the state government?
So it was a long-term lease established in the 1980s that was converted to an outright purchase in the period 1996 through 1998.
It was a piece of land that was given to those 30 or 21 organisations?
Correct. Yeah. So yeah, it was leased originally.
Lease?
I'm not familiar with the term, but yeah.
Meaning, a very nominal price, like $2.
It would have been. I'm not sure about it, like exactly the detail, but I know that the purchase was at that 10,000 a share, in which there was 51 shares. So a total pool of 510,000 went towards the purchase that was eventuated in, if I'm correct, 1998, and of which there was about 491,000, if I'm correct, was the sale price, or the purchase price, and the balance used as a float to fund the needs of the organisation. Those organisations have been levied essentially since that time, and we've stopped that as of last year, given the progress that we've made with the sale specifically. Right, but the name was adopted as Hellenic Village in time to reflect the objectives or the wishes of those organisations, that we would literally build a Hellenic village on the site. So there's early site designs and drawings of building homes, building an artificial lake, building a little church, building a soccer field. Sounds like all the perfect things that Greeks would want as well. But again, they didn't necessarily want to live 50 kilometres from the CBD, and they didn't want to live next to each other. So, right, shock, lo and behold, right? But it was at least in part a response, and in the collective memory of some of those stakeholders that endured today, that it was specifically an initiative that was not influenced or overborne by the Archdiocese or by the Greek community of Sydney. And hence neither of those institutions were unit holders at the time of purchase. Maybe. Maybe. So this here, again, we're fast forwarding a little bit, but to 2011, this is the text of the agreement between the Greek community of Sydney and the Archdiocese, officially ending the schism of long enough, right, if I'm correct, from the early 1960s. And within that article stipulating that there were necessary changes to constitutions, that priests that would have to be appointed to the by the archdiocese to the churches that were owned by the Greek community, and that their salaries would be accounted for kitalipa, right? But again, it's 2011. Hence, and that agreement that was made. One of the things I thought interesting that I noted was that one of the agreements in here was that the Greek community will not organise a festival during Orthodox Lent. Right? Didn't know that until I read this document. Thought very interesting. Yeah. So it just so happens to be on Mardi Gras, I think, like every time in Sydney as well. So it's an interesting weekend to have the Greek festival. But yeah. So yeah, looking now. This is really what we're talking about. We have a long-winded history of different players, organisations, institutions, the Greek state, Consulate General celebrating 100 years of the Greek Consulate General in Sydney. Earlier conversations about earlier partisanship of the consul in the disputes of the early days between the church at Holy Trinity and those that were pro-metropolitan. Again, you're looking at the events of the 100-year celebrations now as well. Particular elements of the Greek community that are reflected or encouraged or invited to participate as part of that celebration as well, which I think is worth exploring and with further discussion as well. But we are fragmented. We are fragmented in that, again, there are different community organisations that are doubling up on similar, likewise services because they weren't able historically and they're not able today to find a means to unify those objectives for particular services, whether it's healthcare, whether it's language teaching and learning, whether it's, again, the award ceremonies. But we have multiple awards for HSE, like the equivalent of VCE here in Melbourne, multiple awards from different factional organisations for the same set of awards to the same set of students, right? Because, again, we've historically had differences that precluded the unity there, but also today we've not found uniting or pooling these resources appropriately necessary or worthwhile. So they've continued in this fractured form. So again, looking now, our communities are a shadow of themselves, right? In that they historically, and I mentioned Mpliokas as an example, Mpliokas had a particular purpose in the 1960s to support Greeks from our Horia, Kastraki, Kalabaka, Adikhasia, to support them on arrival, to find them a place, to find them work, and send them on their way, and to stay connected to each other whilst they were here. That's continued to an extent. We're not accepting or we're not receiving many migrants from our part of the world any longer, and we haven't for a long time. But these organisations now are stuck in their setting from whether it's the 1970s, whether it's the 1980s, whether it's the 1990s. But in any case, we're stuck in those settings. And what I think is the challenge for us is to uncog the concept that this setting, or this being stuck in this setting, is maintaining a legacy of an organisation and its people, its constituents, but rather holding the organisation back from a sustainable future. I think. Yeah, correct. And I think, like the relevance may change over time, and it will shift and it will continue to shift. And if it's really the question of doing in a way that's not acrimonious, that's gradual, that's within the will and with the support of the members of which it's constituted. I've got here, again, a quick map from, of all people, Costa Dados. Costa is another young Greek Australian from Sydney. He's, again, very prolific member of community organisations. Our paths don't overlap all that much, even though we're sort of a similar age, similar zeal or energy for Greek community organisations, but there are different spheres within our community, and every so often we cross paths. He's a secretary of a few of the community organisations. One's Karaiskaki, which is the Pan-Thessalian Federation, of which they're a constituent member of Hellenic Village, with the Pan-Macedonian associations, Chalkidiki, Kelipa. What we've got here, this list is 30 organisations with property, essentially. So these are marked destinations on the map, but what this doesn't show is whether the building is a massive hall that could fit 1,000 people, whether it's a shop front that will fit 10, whether it's an asset worth $50 million, or whether it's an empty parcel of land worth $100, right? But if we look at it on the map, it gives us one picture, and we need to dive deeper into how these assets were accumulated, where and who they belong to, and how we might be able to support our community objectives moving forward with them as well. That's that. This second map here is about, I mentioned earlier, the Greek Orthodox churches in the greater Sydney region. I've included the Central Coast and not Newcastle, and I've included the 2 churches in Wollongong as well. Again, so there's churches St. Nectarios and the other escapes me as well in Wollongong. One was, we'll call it schismatic. They were down the road from each other. Now they're there nearby. But again, the different colours here you'll see, the blue are those that are the Archdiocese, the Springwood, which is one of the monasteries up in the Blue Mountains, but also the urban sprawl that really proliferated from the 1960s onwards. But what I haven't reflected here, this is my doing. What isn't reflected here is the difference and the distinction between the constitutional makeups of these different parishes. Some are parishes in that they are enorias. Some are parish communities in that they're kinotites, and they have fundamentally different structures about how what their relationship is with its own constituency, members and parishioners, and how that relates and translates to dynamics with the Archdiocese as well. Again, you can still just walk into church, light a candle, say a prayer, walk in and walk out, but there are fundamental differences in the makeup of these institutions as well. And St. Spiridon is one of the historic parishes now of southeastern Sydney, very historic part of Greek Sydney, very significant parish there as well, long-standing priest there also. But again, it recently changed its constitution, which with some fanfare, but not all that much, from being a parish community to being an enoria. So, yeah, and then we've got, again, but with the exception of the Archdiocese up in the top corner, just some of the community organisations that are operating today. And what's not reflected here is, again, whether or not these are organisations with 100 members, organisations with 1,000 members, organisations with 5 members. And there's a disparity here between the organisational makeup, its legacy, its individual history, its relationship in community, and its trajectory moving forward. Part of the overarching part of the discourse is that community organisations deserve to continue or deserve to close, they deserve to die, they deserve to end. This isn't a conversation about which ones are worth keeping and which ones are worth jettisoning. That's part of the conversation that needs to change. The question is, again, how do we keep these organisations relevant? I think the distinction here is, again, about the role of the Big C community as part of this. This is, again, and I think this is I did this on purpose, but yeah, the Big C community is one of these logos amongst very large other number of community organisations. Some examples, right, to highlight and then explore deeper, but the never-ending lawsuits of a HEPA in New South Wales, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in the Supreme Court, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in the Court of Appeal, 1 to the High Court, leave was not granted. From a period, I think this is 2020 to 2018 through to 2023, I can see the latest one here. One example of an historic functioning community organisation in Sydney with its origins in Werris Creek, of all places. I've never been there. I don't think I've been even close, but it's in regional New South Wales, right? But a HEPA, established nearly 100 years ago in Australia, modelled off the American HEPA, which is very historic there as well and very influential in the United States, but essentially looked to assume a role in community affairs, particularly in the 2010s in Sydney, and had an ascendancy of sorts, looked to message and project itself as a legitimate alternative to the Greek community of Sydney because of the different dynamics at play. The relationship into Hellenic Village. They had shares that Kinota didn't. Again, the ideology and the ideological positions of the organisation by comparison to those in other parts of the secular communities. Part of the unravelling of this particular organisation that had, in the early 2010s and into the 2020s, hundreds of members, mostly in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s and beyond. But part of the unravelling of this particular organisation in New South Wales, right, was about its relationship with its own chapters and constitutional challenges that spiralled into the cases that you see listed here. And again, the question of which side won, the answer is we're still not really sure. We don't think anyone won, maybe the lawyers, but good luck to them as well. Looking forward, we live in the shadow of community versus archdiocese. We might not think it, we might not realise it, we might not understand it, but really we live in that shadow of the community versus the archdiocese and all of the dynamics that it curtails. Right, Hellenic Village as an example now, these are the 21 different associations, right, and the organisations listed there as well. We're at a critical juncture at the life of our community organisation. Now, again, sharing as the chair and what's been reported publicly in the news over this last period has been that these organisations have so many shares, and collectively we made decisions, myself again biased as the chair, I'll explain that, but we had a tilt at the leadership because we weren't satisfied with the structure of the team. We weren't satisfied with the vision that the board had projected at the time, and we thought that it was appropriate for us to outline that a little bit better, at the very least, to our own constituency. And in that time, again, the high-level objective has been to understand our value of the site, because it was held essentially in trust, just the site, 42 hectares, 105 acres, right, 50 kilometres roughly from Sydney CBD. Right? And again, offers on the table in the tens of millions, but we weren't sure what they were. We were concerned that it wasn't reflecting the market value, the offers that we received off market. Our team sought about and got a valuation for the site, came back at $60 million, which was significantly more than the offers that we'd received off market. Lo and behold, we thought that we would get the mandate from the members to conduct different processes. One, to understand whether we had the capacity to develop the site. We don't want to sell, but we wanted to be able to hold and develop the site. But it wasn't within our power based on the structure, the legacy structure that we inherited, to manage it in that particular context. So we had consensus from the organisations here to do so. Right? Then we had a process to conduct regarding the sale. Then a process about appointing the agent. Then about understanding whether or not we're prepared to sell or not. Now that we've sold, again, what the terms and the structure of that deal are. Right? And that's now coming to the point of establishing a charitable fund for the majority of the funds and the proceeds of this sale, but through loopholes and running around for different barristers' opinions and legal advice, we've finally got it in hand. And that advice is that the organisations, the associations that contributed financially, have an absolute entitlement to the proceeds of this sale. That doesn't mean that they're taking their money and running. It means it's their choice and their responsibility to make that decision. And my job now as the chair to help outline that advice that we receive and what that path looks like, to establish the vision for that charitable structure. And if they're satisfied that it will be able to serve our community into the future, then to do so as well. I think, again, it's exciting, terrifying, all of these things because of the dollars involved and the generational responsibility that lies within. Right? But at the moment, it's just a conversation about money on a sheet of paper. We need to be able to create a vision to support our community moving forward. And something that will be flexible, something that will be adaptable, something that's accessible for our community moving forward as well. Looking deeper, the grass isn't always greener, or is it? I think these are some important distinctions to make. The Greeks of Sydney, look beyond. They look at other examples of community institutions or comparatives, and they may misinformed, ill-informed, uninformed perceptions that fester or that grow regarding, again, the strength or otherwise of community institutions and aspirations. On the left here, again, thanks Dinka Limnio for the top message as well. Right? But yeah, Vasilopita, again, celebrating Bill Papaseriadis. The perception of Bill as a leader of the community specifically, that has been able to lead a generation of the Greek community here in Sydney, and the comparison unfavourably to the Greek community, against the Greek community of Sydney. Right? There were elections in the late 2025 that changed the community leadership, big C, community leadership for the first time in 30 years. And that's been the opening chapter of a momentous change in the community. And what that will look like and what the consequences of that change are yet to be explored in detail and are still developing. In the centre, the Hellenic Club of Canberra. Again, George, you got all this money, why don't you just build the Hellenic Club of Canberra? We love the Hellenic Club of Canberra. We're so proud of the Hellenic Club of Canberra. The people at the Hellenic Club of Canberra are fantastic. The development that's listed as well is very historic and very impressive. Right? But as one community leader to another, I don't know it that well. And part of my mission at the Greek Australian Society is to better understand the different community dynamics, to be able to share and translate that success or the best practice in each scenario to something comparable or adaptable in different spaces as well. Right? The Greeks of Sydney talk about very proudly the Greek community of Canberra, but very few have gone through, or maybe they've gone once in 10 years or once in 20 years. Right? It's important for us to, in celebrating or acknowledging its strength or its position or its presence, how the community was able to establish an institution like this in the nation's capital. And then again, front page of the front page of the Australian last week, that's implicated the Greek community of Sydney with being anti-Semitic. And again, front page, extensive coverage, and surely developing tensions between communities at the time that, specifically in Sydney, after the Bondi attacks, is really not what's called for. We want to be able to bring residents and local community members and organisations together, but instead we're making it for all the wrong reasons. Right? But the Greek community of Sydney, the constituents, look up to or idealise, the Jewish community organisations in our city and state, without having engaged with them extensively, without understanding, the community challenges or the upheavals or the trajectories that they've been able to go through. It's important to engage with other communities that have had similar experiences to learn where they can, support us in our own growth, and where we might be able to share our experiences with them and others. A lack of youth, right, or a lack of purpose. I think this to tie the conversation as well. Again, very common conversation. All I see is, or people saying that all I see is grey hairs in community spaces. The community members are too old, that there isn't a youth, and we need more youth. I had a conversation with the community leader who was elected president of an organisation a fortnight ago, and I asked him what their vision was for their organisation, and they said to bring back the youth. Okay, great. Can you elaborate on what that might look like? No. Okay, right. So it's important to highlight that there's a need, but we need to be able to elaborate or make a further distinction on what that might look like. We specifically at the Greek Australian Society avoided the term of youth because we wanted to emphasise on something else. It's not youth versus a broader community dynamic, but something that focuses on young Greek Australians, I mentioned before. But yeah, the Greek community in New South Wales, again, Mpliokas, right? I think important to point, this is again, Ψήφισαν, αυτοπροσώπως, 166% and 340 with proxies. These are the most recent elections of the Greek community of Sydney, and it is comprised of or reduced to or consists of 166 people in person and 340 proxies. What that means is that there's changing dynamics in our community structures. One thing that I haven't listed here, I'd love to show, is that in the building of the Greek community of Sydney, there's a plaque from the probably 1970s or 80s. It's a vinyl, I think, as well, with kolimeno, and it's reduced down, it's peeling off, and it says, sign up your children when they turn 18 and get a free membership for the first year. I would like to challenge, as a member of the community as well, I'd like to challenge to ask how many of our 18-year-olds have joined that community organisation, as a result of that flyer, right? And I think this is in contrast to the Mytilenean Brotherhood, who had elections the other week, right? Again, this article is referring to the annual general meeting without a reference to the organisation itself. It's 300 members that attended the AGM, right? It's an important question to ask about the distinctions between the compositions of these organisations and whether its membership is its strength, its asset position, its output, its program, and can we find a balance between these objectives or these metrics?
But if I'm not mistaken, there's a legal case going on in the Hellenic Village.
I'm not aware of that, so yeah, maybe.
Unfortunately, whenever there's conflict, the numbers go up. It's a numbers game. Just like
No, sorry, that was in the Olympic, not in the Mytilenean. We mentioned that earlier. That's right. A few final slides, and then we'll call it. But yeah, this one, again, we're missing the logo here, but it's for the Kogra Orthodox Youth. All right, very interesting community dynamic that's been established recently, which is for the youth chapter of one of the local parishes, Kogra, very historic parish in southeastern Sydney, and very impressive, we must say, youth organisation that's run now the last 7 or 8 years, or 6 years from 2020. But again, the emphasis on establishing that community is really important, but we need to look deeper. What's the relationship of those constituents? But I think what it reflects is that young Greek Australians are looking, they're searching for connection, right? And that's part of the message to challenge, that young Greek Australians aren't interested, they don't care. No, they do very much, but they are looking for an opportunity to connect with these institutions and organisations. And then, again, the Greek Australian Society. Some of the Melbourneites that are here from our recent Young Leaders program. Again, I work for a Member of Parliament, and I explained to them in Canberra the other month, this isn't everyone's cup of tea. Don't want to be advocating and being front-facing to prime ministers and politicians every day. It's very tiresome, even for somebody who works for an MP, right? But we're part of a community ecosystem. And what we've gone about and emphasised is that we need to create structure for our community institutions to support different needs of the community, whether it's advocacy. But here, I think I'm very, very pleased to share that we had in our first edition, supported by a number of community sponsors, 17 young Greek Australians that came from all over the country to meet for 3 days to discuss very important topics about the future of our respective communities. Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, the ACT, Tasmania, South Australia. We'll find a way to connect with Northern Territory and Western Australia shortly as well. But I think that, again, in closing, the point to make is that these Greek Australians are here to inherit and build on the legacy of the institutions that we have. The Greek community of Sydney is very complex, obviously. There are many dynamics that continue to play, but I very much am excited by the prospect of diving even deeper into those dynamics. I think we can call it there, and we can continue with questions.
Thank you, George. I think we can have you here for about a week and you still wouldn't finish. There's so much to discuss. You've covered a lot, and I'm sure there's going to be quite a few questions. I might sort of kickstart off the questioning. That conflict that you described in the early part of the history of all the communities, it's really no surprise because it happened everywhere. It happened in Egypt, it happened in the US. You see it across the board, so we're not sort of unique in that sense. It was something very common because you're dealing with two different governance models as well, one autocratic and one more sort of democratic. But my question is, it's interesting that growing up in the 70s and even in the 80s, at least when it came to soccer or football, the big rivalry was South Melbourne and Heidelberg, Hellas Alexander. That wasn't replicated in Sydney, even though there's a large Greek Macedonian community there as well. Any ideas why that didn't occur, or it's just about the individuals?
Yeah, I think there's something similar that did occur, and Tigris mentions, or no, it's Georgiakis that mentions it as well, is that I suppose the closest equivalent is Canterbury Marrickville, the Berries from the mid-60s. And I think Pan-Hellenic, from again, Vasilis Vasilas, from Georgiakis as well, is that it was one of the earlier, if not the first, Pan-Hellenic soccer team in Sydney. There was Atlas, there was the Cypriots, there was, I think, a team in Granville. So there were, and maybe some of the islanders had a few teams from the 1910s through to the 50s. And Pan-Hellenic was one of the first to unite those different groups and not be politically motivated or associated. There were some disassociated members of Pan-Hellenic that decided to break away, and Georgiakis mentions it in his thesis as being a second Pan-Hellenic project, and that those members expected to really split the Greek community and follow away, and that never really eventuated. They celebrated their 140th anniversary on the weekend. They basically took over a pre-existing community club. So they're very historic in the one regard. If I understand they own property, so they were able to fund themselves. They were financially very, very affluent for a state soccer team. But they were one or several levels below. They weren't acknowledged. There's almost an inverse of the big C community dynamics. I think there's an understanding that the Greek community of Melbourne is not like a brotherhood. I think the Greek community of Sydney has acted and behaved and has dynamics of just being another brotherhood, but the football clubs are the inverse. I think the Berries has always been a second or third tier club, and Sydney Olympic has 10 members or 10 fans at some games, but 10,000 at others.
And the Georgiakis you mentioned, any relation to the Dan Georgiakis, the Greek-American sort of activist and academic, or just coincidence?
I think it's just a coincidence, but it's apparently Tom Panos' next door neighbour as well, the real estate agent. So I got to go find him.
Okay.
Thanks, Nick. Thank you so much, George. Loved your lecture, which was both highly informative and also energising. My question is, how can Greek communities, lowercase plural, maintain strong cultural ties while also preventing interpersonal drama, factionalism, power struggles? Essentially, how can they be healthy and not toxic?
Thanks, Olympia, for asking. It's probably something I should have mentioned in my discussion. But I think an important distinction to make from the get-go is that with the majority of the brotherhoods and associations, they're regionally based. The island, the village, the town. So they've automatically restricted themselves to membership from a particular closed bracket. Meteora, as an example, there's 8 or 10 families that are all related to each other because they're all Horiani from Kastraki. We're the exo-Horiani because we're 2 towns over. So we just make the cutoff in terms of Silogo land, but we're actually not related to anyone else. All right, so that has all its own dynamics when we're talking about many millions of dollars that we're facing. We're collegiate and we're friends, but we need to be careful of what those dynamics might mean. And at the end of the day, do you vote against family members? Is blood just thicker than water? Important, I think, is to reform our community structures and modernise them more broadly so that they're more merit-based. It's not just about who your parents were or where they grew up, not just about where mum and dad was from, or Papu was a president here or a committee member there, but because you have a particular skill set that you want to contribute to civic life. And that's why there's a need for organised community organisations. And where better to start than the Greek community of Melbourne, the Greek community of Sydney, to really emphasise those. I think the shortcomings of the Greek community of Sydney is that those Greek Australians, young Greek Australians that have been driven to supporting and continuing to contribute, have been the collateral damage of the historic challenges of yesteryear. That generation is coming to a close one way or another, and now is the opportunity to help reform those community structures. It's really about, I think, highlighting the role of the communities as opposed to the regional-based brotherhoods, to have a program that supports the growth and the expression of its constituents, and then being able to maintain and strengthen that over time.
Their own organisations a bit undercooked, because I've seen some commentary that in Melbourne alone, about 532 Greek organisations, some are active, semi-active and inactive. So I just thought that number was a bit on the low side, or
Yes. So I think, it's important to note that the maps, firstly, 30 organisations with property, there's more than that. There's clearly more than that, and there's organisations that have many buildings or have portfolios of assets kalipa. And again, not to just count people's community buildings and the rest as well, but especially those that are historic, typically they have multiple footprints across the city and even in the regions. I know some of them have got farmland of their own that they purchased on the outskirts of Sydney a little bit further. But more specifically, I think to your question, Nick, we've seen I think a more rapid decline and over this last decade. I think the general consensus was that the Greek community had 10 or had 20 or 30 years before this generational change would take effect. But what we see is in organisations, even large ones like the Cyprus community of New South Wales, the building at Stanmore, that's very well publicised about the challenges that it has. But it's a landmark of the city. It's the old Newtown Jets Club, a very famous rugby league team, in part of the inner west of Sydney. I would, and other Greek Australians would drive past Stanmore Road and be like, the Cyprus Club is there, the Greek flag is up, the Cyprus flag is there, the doors are open, everything's fine. And I think that was the wrong perception to have had when we've realised that there's been not any one individual's fault, but a chain of mismanagement that's led to the decline of the organisation more entirely. So that's something that would be on the map, but very soon won't be. They're going to look for a new home. Whether they find one or not will be a question there as well. But I think, again, there's probably, again, the safe estimate was that there were 200 Greek community organisations, but are they dormant? Have they closed? I think this is really important.
And also
question.
beyond the regional brotherhoods, there's other type of associations as well, which you probably haven't covered, but
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm a member of the Customarian Association, so I'm just wondering the role that the Greek community has. I've been actively involved for 20 years now. Never once has the Greek Orthodox community of Melbourne reached out to us. We've reached out to them, and they're meant to be the main. Why don't they bring the different disparate organisations together? There's no one's running the show here in Melbourne. So, we put our hand up in the last couple of years for the Antipodes Festival. No one told us to do it. No one's approached us. And I just feel like we're all going our own way. We're all losing members. We're all sitting on valuable land and no one's coming through the door. But I do think our leaders have to do something a bit more active.
Well, I think, maybe the grass isn't greener, right? So, with respect to the board members of the community that are here tonight as well, I think this is an important topic, an important discussion to have. Myself, in a Sydney context, firstly, has been about making every effort to connect. I think GAS has been a reflection or a manifestation of our desire, young Greek Australians, wanting to be more connected with each other. And we had a national focus, and we have a national focus because we want to continue to build positive relationships. Sometimes it's easier to build those positive relationships over great distances across this continent than it is to work with the people that live next door, that run the community organisations down the road. And again, there's all sorts of dynamics for that. I think the emphasis is about staying positive, staying connected, and normalizing these relationships. I think there's a lot of suspicion, historic tension as well. That will fade with the passing of generations. But the question will be, it's like playing roulette. There's a big unknown. All right, I'm on the board at Hellenic Village. I'm in my 30s, and the rest of the board are in their 60s, 70s, 80s. I've been able to introduce members in their 40s and 50s over the last 2 terms. But it is generally an ageing community organisation leadership-wise, and it reflects their organisations, and they've been in leadership of those organisations for many years as well. They have long memories, they don't forgive, and they think they know best. So the question is, from that, right, and then I asked all of them, I said, I'm happy for anyone else on this board to be the chair. No, Georgia si canto si. Right? And not just because I'm the youngest myself, but because we need to be the change that we want to see. And I think that's the opportunity that before us now, to just normalise these relationships, get to know one another.